Ethan Cole was known as a man who never missed a meeting, never lost a deal, and never showed emotion. His office stood on the top floor of the tallest building in the city, filled with glass walls, leather chairs, and silence. To his employees, he was a strict, powerful man, calm, sharp, and impossible to read. But that night, as he sat alone finishing reports under the soft glow of his desk lamp, his world was about to change in a way he could never imagine. It was nearly midnight when his phone rang. At first he ignored it, thinking it was another business call. But the same number kept flashing again and again. With a tired sigh, he answered, his voice cold and short. "Ethan Cole speaking." On the other side, a woman's voice trembled. "Sir, this is St. Grace Hospital." "Are you Mr. Cole?" Ethan frowned. "Yes, I am. Why?" "There's a woman named Lily Evans listed under your name as her only emergency contact. She's in critical condition. Please come quickly." For a moment, Ethan didn't speak. The words didn't make sense. Lily Evans, his personal assistant, the quiet woman who always wore simple clothes, never complained, and worked long hours without a word of protest? Why would he be her emergency contact? He almost thought it was a mistake. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir. You're the only number in her file." Ethan stood up slowly. The papers on his desk blurred before his eyes. He had seen Lily that morning. She was pale and tired, but had said nothing. She had smiled softly when he gave her more files to handle. "I'll finish them before lunch, sir," she had said. He hadn't even thanked her. Now she was fighting for her life. Within minutes, Ethan grabbed his coat and car keys. The city outside was dark and quiet, the streets shining from the evening rain. His driver offered to come, but Ethan shook his head. "I'll drive myself." He wanted silence, the kind that let him think. As he drove through the sleeping city, his thoughts ran wild. Why had Lily listed him? Didn't she have family? Friends? Someone closer? He tried to remember if she had ever talked about her personal life, but he couldn't recall a single thing. She had always kept her distance, never asking for anything beyond her job. The hospital lights appeared in the distance. Ethan parked quickly and walked through the glass doors. His heart beat faster than it had been in years. Inside, the smell of medicine and cleaning agents filled the air. A nurse recognized him immediately. It was hard not to notice a billionaire walking into a hospital in a black suit at midnight. "Mr. Cole, this way, please," she said softly, leading him down a quiet hallway. When they stopped outside a small room, the nurse turned to him. She collapsed at her apartment after work. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition. She hasn't eaten properly for days. "You're the only one we could call." Ethan felt a strange heaviness in his chest. Exhaustion? Malnutrition? How could that be? She worked for one of the richest companies in the country. How could his employee, his assistant, be starving while managing his schedule and his success? He stepped into the room. The beeping of machines echoed softly. Lily lay there, pale and still, her hair spread on the pillow, her breathing slow. There were faint shadows under her eyes, the kind that came from sleepless nights and endless stress. A small bandage covered her arm where the IV was attached. Ethan walked closer, his polished shoes making no sound on the floor. For the first time, he didn't see an assistant. He saw a human being, fragile, quiet, and forgotten. He sat on the chair beside her bed. His hands, always confident, now trembled slightly. Memories of her soft voice, her tired smile, and her calm patience came flooding back. He realized how many times he had pushed her without ever looking past her work. She had been invisible in his busy world. Hours passed. The rain outside turned to a light drizzle. Ethan didn't move. He ignored the vibrating phone in his pocket. Investors, partners, meetings could wait. The world could wait. Around 3 a.m, the nurse entered again. "Sir, we've stabilized her, but she'll need rest for several days. She has no family listed, no one else to help her." "Will you stay until she wakes up?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll stay." When the nurse left, he leaned back in his chair, staring at Lily. He wondered how many people around him were quietly struggling the same way. People he never noticed, never asked about, never thanked. For the first time in his life, he felt small inside his own power. He looked at Lily and whispered softly, "Why me, Lily? Why did you choose me?" But of course she couldn't answer. As dawn began to break through the hospital window, the once cold billionaire sat there, eyes tired but heart awake. He didn't know it yet, But that single call, that one unexpected voice from the hospital, had just changed everything he believed about life, success and kindness. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole wasn't thinking about his empire, his meetings, or his fortune. He was thinking about one simple thing: a young woman who had given everything for others and had no one when she needed help most. That night, a powerful man's story quietly began to turn human. The morning light crept slowly through the half-closed blinds of the hospital room. The soft beeping of machines was the only sound that broke the silence. Ethan Cole sat in a chair beside Lily's bed, still wearing the same black suit from the night before. His tie hung loose and his eyes showed sleepless hours. He had spent the whole night watching over her, unsure why he couldn't bring himself to leave. He was used to solving problems with money and power. If a deal went wrong, he paid more. If a person left, he hired another. But now, sitting beside Lily, there was nothing his wealth could fix in that moment. He felt helpless, and that feeling was new to him. A nurse entered quietly, checking Lily's IV line. She smiled politely at Ethan. "You've been here all night, sir. She's stable now, but she needs rest." Ethan nodded. "How long before she wakes up?" "It could be hours, maybe a day. She was very weak." "Do you want to call any of her family?" He hesitated. "She doesn't have anyone listed, just me." The nurse gave a soft, understanding nod. "Then she must have trusted you a lot." Ethan looked at Lily again. Trusted him? He could hardly believe that. He was her boss, strict, distant, demanding. Trust wasn't something he thought he had earned from anyone, especially from someone like her. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city was waking up, cars moving, people hurrying to work, the normal noise of life. But inside that small room, time felt frozen. The world that had always moved for him now seemed still, waiting. Ethan thought back to all the times he had seen Lily in the office. She was always early, always organized, always quiet. When others left at 6 p.m., she stayed until late, finishing his reports. Sometimes she skipped lunch, saying she wasn't hungry. He had noticed but never asked why. He assumed she was just committed to her job. Now, looking at her frail body lying there, he realized how wrong he had been. The door opened slightly, and Dr. Harris, an older man with gentle eyes, stepped in. "Mr. Cole," he greeted, extending his hand. "I'm the attending physician." Ethan shook his hand. "How is she, doctor?" "She's out of immediate danger," Dr. Harris said calmly. "But she collapsed from overwork and lack of proper nutrition. Her blood pressure was extremely low. We found signs of long-term stress, fatigue, and anxiety." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Overwork? Are you saying she's been pushing her body too hard for too long?" The doctor interrupted softly. "People like her often forget themselves while trying to keep everything running for others. It's common, especially for those living alone." Those words hit Ethan like a mirror held up to his own company. The long hours, the endless pressure, the way employees feared mistakes. Lily had been one of the best, but she had been quietly breaking while he kept adding more to her plate. "Doctor," Ethan said slowly, "I'll take care of her bills. Everything she needs." Dr. Harris nodded with a small smile. "That's very kind, sir. But what she'll need most is rest, and people who care." After the doctor left, Ethan sat back down. He watched Lily's hand resting on the bed, pale and still. For a long moment, he simply stared, lost in thoughts he didn't recognize. He remembered the first time she came to his company. A shy young woman in a worn gray coat, holding her resume with trembling hands. She had spoken politely but with quiet confidence. He had almost dismissed her, thinking she looked too fragile for a high-pressure job. But she had surprised him. She learned quickly, never complained, and worked harder than anyone else. He had admired her efficiency, but never her effort. Now he wondered what her life had been outside the office. Did she live alone? Did she have dreams she couldn't afford? Why didn't she tell anyone when things got this bad? The clock ticked quietly on the wall. Every second felt longer than usual. A soft knock came at the door and a young nurse stepped in carrying a tray of coffee. "You should have something, sir. You've been here for hours." Ethan thanked her and took a sip. It was bitter but warm. It grounded him. He leaned back and watched Lily breathe, her chest rising and falling slowly. Something inside him stirred. Not pity, but a strange sense of responsibility. For years, he had lived surrounded by people who wanted something from him: investors, clients, social friends. But Lily had never asked for anything. She had given without expecting a single thing in return. As the hours passed, Ethan began to see the truth, that all his money and status meant little compared to the quiet strength of someone who worked through pain without complaint. He stood and adjusted her blanket, making sure she was warm. He wasn't used to such small gestures, but it felt right. A few minutes later, he stepped out into the hallway to stretch his legs. Nurses passed by, patients talked softly, and a janitor hummed an old song while mopping the floor. Life went on, simple, slow, real. When he walked back into Lily's room, he noticed a small folder on the bedside table. It had her name written on it in neat handwriting. Inside were a few papers, her medical file, emergency contact sheet, and an old photo. It was of Lily and an older woman, both smiling despite standing in front of what looked like a small countryside house. On the back it said, "Me and Mom, my reason to keep going." Ethan stared at the photo for a long time. That single line explained everything: her long hours, her exhaustion, her silence. She had been fighting for someone she loved. He placed the photo gently back on the table and sat down again. The room was silent except for the steady beeping of the monitor. For the first time, the billionaire who ruled over glass towers and million-dollar meetings realized how fragile real life could be. He whispered quietly, "You've done enough, Lily. It's time someone helped you now." And in that quiet hospital room, Ethan Cole, the man known for power, felt something far more powerful than wealth for the very first time: compassion. The next morning, Ethan Cole walked through the hospital hallway holding a cup of black coffee that had already gone cold. He hadn't left Lily's side for more than a few minutes since the night she was admitted. His phone had been ringing nonstop. Meetings postponed, clients waiting, investors demanding explanations. But none of that mattered. For the first time in years, his empire could wait. He stood near the nurse's counter signing payment papers for Lily's treatment. "Everything should be covered," he said firmly, slipping his card across the counter. The nurse smiled politely. "It already is, sir." "Thank you. She's lucky to have someone who cares." Ethan didn't respond. The word "someone who cares" felt strange. He wasn't used to being described that way. He had spent most of his life being called powerful, strict, ambitious, never caring. But maybe, he thought, it was time for that to change. When he returned to Lily's room, she was still unconscious, her breathing slow but steady. The sunlight from the window made her look peaceful, though her face still showed signs of exhaustion. He sat down, resting his elbows on his knees, trying to make sense of everything. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Harris entered again, holding a small folder in his hand. "Mr. Cole, I thought you should see this. It's Miss Evans' patient record. There's something you might want to know." Ethan stood up, curiosity mixed with concern. "What is it?" The doctor opened the file carefully. "She's been suffering from extreme fatigue and anemia for months. She's had several minor collapses before, but she never came for proper treatment. She told the nurse she couldn't afford to take days off work, said her boss depended on her." Ethan's stomach sank. He looked at the doctor, feeling a sharp sting of guilt. "She said that?" Dr. Harris nodded. "Yes, and according to her record, she's been working more than one job. It seems she's been supporting an elderly mother who's been ill for a long time." Ethan's hands tightened into fists. He could almost hear her soft voice again saying, "I'll stay late, sir, it's okay." He thought she was just loyal, maybe even ambitious. But she wasn't chasing success, and she was surviving. The doctor closed the folder and placed it in his hands. "She's strong, Mr. Cole, but no one can carry that kind of burden alone." After the doctor left, Ethan sat back down, staring at the folder as if it were a mirror showing him everything he had failed to see. Each page was a quiet cry for help. Hospital visits she couldn't afford, medicine left unpaid, notes about fatigue and stress. He turned to the last page and found a contact form. Under family, there was only one name: Mother Grace Evans, critical illness, and below that, under emergency contact, his own name, Ethan Cole. He couldn't understand it. Why him? Why would she list her cold, demanding boss as her only contact? Maybe she thought he'd be the only one who would answer. Maybe she had no one else left. The thought made his chest tighten. Determined to learn more, Ethan called his secretary and asked her to send someone to find Lily's home address and deliver any personal documents to him. A few hours later, a file arrived from the company archives, her employment record. He opened it and found her first resume attached. It was simple, neat, and written with sincerity. Under hobbies, she had written only one line: taking care of my mom and reading. He sighed deeply. In her file, he saw a reflection of something he had lost long ago: humanity. Ethan leaned back in the chair, looking at Lily again. She looked fragile but strong, like someone who had fought too many battles in silence. For years, he had believed that success came from being hard, unfeeling, untouchable. But here she was, a woman with nothing. Yet her loyalty and heart had built his world behind the scenes. Hours later, as evening light filled the room, the nurse came to change the IV. "She'll recover faster now," she said kindly. "Sometimes people like her just need someone to notice them." Ethan gave a faint smile. Yes, someone should have noticed her long ago. When the nurse left, he stood near the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. He had spent his whole life building those lights: skyscrapers, offices, towers filled with people like Lily. But tonight, those same lights felt hollow. He turned back to her and whispered, "I didn't know, Lily, I should have asked." He sat again, opening his laptop. Instead of reading business reports, he began searching for something else: information about Grace Evans, her mother. It didn't take long. He found a small clinic report online: unpaid bills, medical treatments on hold, and an address far from the city. Without thinking twice, Ethan called his driver. "Prepare the car. We're visiting someone." It was past 9 p.m. when Ethan arrived at the small apartment building listed in the records. The elevator was broken, so he climbed the stairs quietly. On the third floor, he found the right door. Old paint, rusted number plate, and a weak yellow light shining from inside. He knocked softly. After a moment, an older woman with kind but tired eyes opened the door. "Yes?" she asked politely. "Mrs. Grace Evans?" he said. She nodded slowly. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. "My name is Ethan Cole. I'm your daughter's employer." Her expression changed instantly, surprise mixed with worry. "Lily, is she okay?" Ethan softened his tone. "She's in the hospital, but she's stable now. She'll be fine." Tears filled the woman's eyes as she covered her mouth. "Oh, my sweet girl. She works too much. I told her she needs to rest." Ethan looked around the small apartment. The furniture was old but clean, and the air smelled faintly of soup. On the table, stacks of hospital bills lay open beside a half-empty medicine bottle. It all became clear. Every late night, every extra hour Lily worked was for this, for her mother, for love, for survival. Before leaving, Ethan quietly placed an envelope on the table. It contained payment receipts for all the pending medical bills he had covered. "She doesn't have to worry anymore," he said gently. Grace looked at him in disbelief. "Why would you do that, sir?" Ethan paused. "Because your daughter has done more for me than I ever realized." He turned to leave, but before he stepped out, Grace whispered, "Thank you. Please tell her I love her." As Ethan drove back through the silent city, his reflection in the car window looked different, not like a billionaire, but like a man finally beginning to understand what truly mattered. And for the first time, he wasn't thinking about profits or power. He was thinking about redemption. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean and glistening. Ethan Cole stood at the edge of the hospital bed, staring at Lily as she slept peacefully. She looked better now, her breathing steady, her color returning, but she was still weak. He knew she wouldn't wake for a few more hours. Ethan had spent the night thinking. The image of her frail mother in that tiny apartment haunted him. The piles of unpaid bills, the quiet struggle hidden behind her gentle smile, everything replayed in his mind. For years he had walked past thousands of employees without truly seeing them, but now he couldn't stop seeing her. He decided he needed to understand more, her life, her world, the quiet pain she had endured. So he called his driver and asked to be taken back to her apartment. The car pulled into the narrow lane where Lily lived. The tall skyscrapers of the city gave way to small, tired buildings with peeling paint and broken fences. Children played with old toys in puddles left by the rain, and an old man sold tea from a cart near the corner. Ethan stepped out, his polished shoes splashing lightly in the water. His dark coat made him stand out in the humble street. People turned to look. No one expected to see the city's most powerful businessman walking through their neighborhood. But Ethan barely noticed. He reached her building, old, with cracked steps and rusted mailboxes. As he climbed the narrow staircase, the smell of damp walls and faint cooking filled the air. When he reached her floor, he paused outside her door. It was the same one he had seen the night before, but this time, the light was off. He gently pushed the door open with the spare key the landlord had given him after explaining who he was. Inside, the small apartment was quiet. The living room was neat but worn out. A faded couch stood against one wall, a small bookshelf beside it. There were framed photos of Lily and her mother. Lily smiling as a teenager, holding her mother's hand. Her eyes in those pictures were bright and full of hope. Ethan walked deeper inside, his heart heavy. The kitchen was small, with a single burner stove and a few dishes stacked neatly. There were handwritten notes stuck to the fridge, reminders like, "Buy medicine, call hospital, and work extra hours this week." He noticed a table by the window covered in papers. When he walked closer, he saw they were unpaid hospital invoices. The totals were frighteningly high. Lily had been drowning in debt, yet she had never once mentioned it. He sat down and looked around. There was something deeply human about the space, simple, clean, full of quiet dignity. She hadn't let poverty take away her order or pride. On the corner of the table lay a small notebook. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside were pages filled with neat handwriting. It wasn't a diary, it was more like a record of her daily life. "Work 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., one line read. "Mom's medicine refill due. Boss seemed tired today. Make coffee stronger tomorrow." Ethan smiled sadly at that last line. Even while fighting her own battles, she had cared about making his days easier. As he turned more pages, he found one that made his chest tighten. "I hope one day Mr. Cole realizes I only wanted to do my best. I don't need him to notice me, but I hope he's proud of the work I do." Ethan closed the notebook slowly. His throat felt dry and he looked around the room once more. It was filled with traces of her quiet strength. No luxury, no comfort, yet full of love. He walked to her mother's bedroom. The bed was neatly made, the air smelling faintly of lavender. On the bedside table was a framed picture of Lily as a child holding a small trophy. The words "for kindness and effort" were engraved on the plaque. He smiled faintly. Of course, kindness. That's what defined her. Even in a world that rewarded greed and ambition, she had chosen kindness, and it had nearly broken her. As he was about to leave, his phone buzzed. It was his secretary. "Sir, there's an emergency meeting with investors in 30 minutes. Should I postpone again?" Ethan looked out the window. The sunlight hit the rooftops and he could see children laughing below. "Yes," he said quietly. "Postpone it. Tell them I'm handling something important." He took one last look around Lily's apartment, then opened his briefcase. From inside, he pulled out a checkbook. He wrote a large amount, enough to clear her debts, pay the rent for years, and cover her mother's care. He placed the check under the notebook along with a note that said, "For everything you gave without asking. You are not alone anymore. Easy." As he locked the door behind him, Ethan felt something shift inside. He had always believed money was power, but standing in that small, quiet home, he realized true power was compassion, the ability to lift someone when they had nothing left. When he returned to the car, his driver glanced at him in the mirror. "Long day, sir?" Ethan looked out at the street where the morning sun now broke through the clouds. "No," he said softly. "It's a new one." Back at the hospital, he entered Lily's room again. The machines beeped softly and she was still resting. He placed the same photo he had seen in her apartment, Lily and her mother smiling, on the table beside her bed. He sat down and whispered quietly, "Rest, Lily. The world will look after you now." And for the first time, Ethan Cole didn't feel like a billionaire sitting beside an employee. He felt like a human being sitting beside another soul, one who had reminded him what humanity truly meant. The hospital room was calm, filled with the soft hum of machines and the warm morning light spilling through the curtains. Ethan sat by the window, his coat hanging loosely on the chair, his eyes tired but watchful. It had been 3 days since Lily's collapse. He hadn't left her side except to get short bursts of rest in the waiting room. For a man who once lived by strict schedules, board meetings, and deadlines, time had started to lose meaning. He stared at Lily's face, pale but peaceful. The IV drip beside her was almost empty now, and her breathing had grown stronger. Every few hours, nurses would come to check her vitals, smiling at him as if they already knew he wasn't going anywhere. That morning, as Ethan reached to adjust the blanket over her, her fingers twitched slightly. He froze, staring. A faint sound escaped her lips, soft like a whisper carried by wind. Then slowly her eyes fluttered open. For a few seconds she looked lost, her gaze wandering around the white walls, the ceiling, the window light. Then her eyes found him. Her lips parted in confusion. "Mr. Cole?" Her voice was weak but filled with surprise. Ethan leaned forward, his calm voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Easy, Lily, don't try to sit up yet." She blinked, trying to make sense of everything. Why are you here?" He gave a faint smile. "Because you scared half the hospital, and me." She tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Ethan quickly poured some water and held the glass for her. His hands were steady, patient. It felt strange to her. This man who usually ordered things to be done was now gently helping her drink. When she finished, she looked at him again, her brows furrowed slightly. "You shouldn't have to be here, sir. I'm so sorry for causing trouble." Ethan shook his head. "You didn't cause trouble, Lily. You've been carrying it for too long." She didn't understand what he meant, but she felt the weight of his words. The last thing she remembered before collapsing was feeling dizzy at her desk, telling herself she could handle one more report. And now, seeing her boss sitting beside her bed like a friend, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Care. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. "You've been working yourself to the edge. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" Lily's eyes lowered. "It wasn't your problem, sir. My mother's been sick for a long time, and the bills—" She stopped, embarrassed. "I just needed to keep going." He nodded slowly. "I know, I've met her." Lily's eyes widened. "You, what?" "I went to see her," Ethan said gently. "She's a kind woman. Strong, just like you. You should rest easy. Her medical bills are taken care of. And your rent, too." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. She shook her head slightly. "You didn't have to do that." "I never wanted pity." "It's not pity," Ethan interrupted softly. "It's gratitude." She looked at him, confused. "Gratitude?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "I built a world where people feared me, not respected me. I thought success meant being cold, being distant. But you worked harder than anyone I've ever known, and you did it quietly without asking for anything. You reminded me what real strength looks like." For a moment, silence filled the room. Only the rhythmic beeping of the monitor could be heard. Lily looked at the man she once thought of as unreachable, the billionaire boss who lived above the clouds, and realized that beneath the expensive suit, there was a man who could care deeply. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," she whispered. "For being here," Ethan smiled faintly. "You can just call me Ethan, you've earned that much." Her lips curved into a small, shy smile. It was the first time he had seen her smile without the weight of exhaustion behind it. The room felt lighter. A nurse came in with a clipboard, glancing at Lily and then at Ethan. "Looks like someone's finally awake." "That's good news. She'll need rest and proper meals now, but she'll recover soon." Ethan nodded. "She'll get both." After the nurse left, Ethan looked back at Lily. "I've already assigned your work to others. You're officially on leave for as long as you need." Her eyes widened again. "But sir—" "No arguments," he said firmly, but his tone carried warmth instead of authority. "Your only job now is to rest and get better." She nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Ethan replied. "Just promise me one thing and stop trying to carry everything alone." Lily looked away for a moment, blinking away tears. "I've been alone for a long time, sir." "It's hard to stop." Ethan's voice softened. "Then let someone else help you now." For a moment their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something deeper, respect, empathy, and a quiet connection that didn't need words. The sunlight warmed the room, and for the first time in many years, Ethan felt peace. He had built skyscrapers, controlled markets, and shaped destinies, but helping one person, one tired, selfless soul, felt greater than all of it. Later that evening, as he stood to leave, Lily's voice stopped him. "Ethan?" He turned. "Thank you for seeing me," he smiled gently. "You've always been there, Lily. I just never looked close enough." And as he walked out of the room, his reflection in the hospital glass no longer looked like the cold billionaire the world feared. It looked like a man rediscovering his humanity, one heartbeat, one act of kindness at a time. When Lily finally returned to work a week later, the office felt different. Not because anything had changed physically, but because the atmosphere itself had shifted. Ethan Cole, who once ruled the company with rigid rules and cold expectations, had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The moment Lily stepped into the building, she noticed it immediately. The receptionist greeted her with genuine smiles, not the usual tense nods. The office lights felt warmer, the air somehow lighter. Even the interns, who normally avoided eye contact with Ethan, seemed more relaxed. Ethan himself was waiting near the entrance, holding the door open. He smiled, a small, sincere smile, and said, "Welcome back, Lily. Take it slow today." She paused, studying him. You don't sound like the boss anymore," she said softly. "I'm still the boss," Ethan replied, but there was a gentleness in his voice. "I just learned something important while you were away." As Lily walked to her desk, she noticed something else. Her co-workers were chatting casually, sharing small laughs, a rare sight in the company's usually tense corridors. A sense of calm and warmth filled the air. Ethan had started small changes that no one had expected. Work hours were adjusted, ensuring that no one stayed late unnecessarily. A new policy provided meal breaks and health checkups for all employees. He had even hired a counselor to help staff handle stress, something unheard of in the high-pressure environment of the company. Lily watched all this quietly, her heart warming. The office that had always felt like a cold machine of efficiency now felt human. She realized that her own struggles had, in a way, changed Ethan too. He had finally seen what mattered beyond profit margins and deadlines, the people who made it all possible. Ethan came to her desk, handing her a cup of coffee, her favorite blend. "You should have this every morning now," he said with a faint smile. She took it, astonished. "Sir, you've never remembered my coffee preference before." "I'm learning," he replied. "It's part of the new me." Lily smiled, feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time, recognition. Not for her work alone, but for her as a person. She realized that her own courage, her silent struggle, had taught him empathy, patience, and kindness. As the day went on, she noticed more changes. Meetings were shorter, with fewer interruptions and more understanding. Colleagues collaborated instead of competing, and Ethan even walked around the office, stopping to ask how people were doing. He listened, really listened, without judgment or rushing. During lunch, Lily saw something extraordinary. Ethan had organized a small surprise for the staff, a catered meal with fresh food, not just the usual vending machine sandwiches. He had spoken briefly to everyone, thanking them for their hard work. There was no speech about profits or success, only genuine gratitude. Lily felt tears prick her eyes. She had always known the office could be a better place, but she never imagined the man who had seemed untouchable could change so deeply. Later, as she returned to her desk, she found a small envelope with her name on it. Inside was a note from Ethan. "Lily, thank you for reminding me what really matters. Today is only the beginning. EC." She looked up, and Ethan was watching from across the room, a quiet smile on his face. He wasn't boasting. He wasn't demanding respect. He was simply present, showing that leadership could be human. Over the next few weeks, the change in the office became more evident. Employees who had once feared Ethan now approached him with questions, suggestions, and even casual conversation. There was laughter in the break rooms, shared stories at lunch, and a new energy that hadn't existed before. Lily noticed something else. Her own work felt lighter. She was no longer carrying the burden of endless overtime alone. She could focus, contribute, and even enjoy small moments at work without fear of being judged or overlooked. The office had become a place of collaboration, care, and respect. One afternoon, Ethan approached her desk with a file in hand. "I've reassigned some of your tasks so you don't have to overwork," he said. "I want you to focus on what matters most: your work, your health, your happiness." Lily looked at him, a mixture of surprise and gratitude in her eyes. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just keep being you." As she looked around the office, she realized how much had changed, not just in policies, but in people's hearts. She had witnessed something rare, a man who had power over many, choosing to use it wisely to create a culture of care instead of fear. Ethan stood quietly, watching Lily from across the room. He had started with one small act, caring for her when she was in need, and it had rippled out, transforming the office. He knew that true leadership wasn't about fear or control. It was about noticing people, valuing them, and acting with kindness. And for the first time, Lily felt truly seen, not just as an assistant or a worker, but as a human being. She smiled softly, realizing that sometimes the quietest struggles had the power to change the loudest lives. The office wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a place where people mattered, where kindness and respect mattered more than power, and where a single act of compassion could create a wave that no one could ignore. For Ethan Cole, the billionaire boss, the lessons Lily had unknowingly taught him were finally clear. Leadership was not in the numbers, the deals, or the skyscrapers. It was in the people, and he would never forget that again. It had been several months since Lily's return to the office. Life had gradually returned to its usual rhythm, but with a noticeable difference. The office was no longer a place of tension and pressure. It was a place of collaboration and respect. Ethan Cole had transformed, not just in how he ran the company, but in how he saw the world around him. One crisp autumn morning, Ethan was seated in his office, reviewing reports while the golden sunlight streamed through the glass walls. He felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The company was thriving, but it wasn't just profits that made him smile anymore. It was the well-being of the people he worked with, and the small, meaningful changes he had made for them. His phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at it and saw a number he didn't recognize. He hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello?" he said, his voice calm. "Sir?" The voice on the other end was soft, familiar, and yet carried a mixture of urgency and gratitude. "It's Lily." Ethan sat upright, surprised but relieved.
Lily, how are you?
"Is everything okay?" Yes, she said quickly, though he could hear the emotion in her tone. "It's my mother. She wanted me to thank you personally. Can you come over?" "Please," he didn't pause. "Of course. I'll be there soon." He instructed his driver, and within a short while he was on the way to Lily's apartment. As the city passed by in golden hues of sunlight, Ethan thought back to the day he had first seen the small apartment, to the piles of unpaid bills, and to the quiet determination of Lily Evans. Every memory felt vivid, every detail etched into his mind. When he arrived, the door opened and Lily appeared, her eyes wide with surprise and happiness. Behind her stood an older woman, Grace Evans, Lily's mother, looking frail but healthy, dressed neatly for the first time in months. "Sir," Lily said softly, almost reverently. Ethan smiled, trying to mask the emotion stirring inside him. "Hello, Lily. Hello, Mrs. Evans. It's good to see you both." Grace stepped forward slowly, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she said in a voice that shook with sincerity. "I don't know how to repay you for what you've done for my daughter and me." Ethan shook his head gently. "There's no repayment necessary. You both just needed a little help, and I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time." Lily smiled faintly, but her eyes were bright with gratitude. "Sir, I don't even know where to start," she whispered. "You start by living your life, Lily," he said kindly. "You've given so much of yourself to others. Now it's time for someone to look after you for a change." Grace took Ethan's hand, tears falling freely now. "You've changed her life. You've saved her, and you've reminded her that kindness still exists in the world." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't used to praise, not from anyone, but in that small apartment, surrounded by genuine emotion, it felt right. Lily led Ethan to the small kitchen. On the table were freshly baked pastries and a pot of tea. "I wanted to make something for you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's not much, but it's my way of saying thank you." Ethan smiled. "It's perfect." They sat together, sipping tea. Lily spoke softly about her mother's recovery, about how much better things were, and about her own newfound sense of freedom from the constant worry she had carried. Ethan listened, quietly proud. He realized that this was one of the most meaningful meetings of his life. Not a business negotiation, Not a boardroom decision, but a human connection built on care, trust, and compassion. After a while, Ethan stood, preparing to leave. "I should go back to the office," he said gently. "But I'll be checking in regularly." Lily's eyes met his, full of emotion. "Sir, or Ethan, I just want you to know something," she said softly. "You didn't just help my mother and me. You changed the way I see the world. You showed me that even the busiest, strongest people can care, and that kindness isn't weakness." Ethan smiled quietly, feeling warmth spread in his chest. "You changed me too, Lily. I've learned more from you than I ever expected. You reminded me what truly matters." Grace squeezed her daughter's hand. "You've both given each other a gift that money can't buy," she said softly. As Ethan stepped out of the apartment, he paused and looked back. Lily waved, smiling, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and trust in her eyes. He felt something rare, a sense of completeness, of balance. The powerful man who had once only understood control and profit had discovered the quiet strength of care, empathy, and human connection. Back in his car, driving through the streets now bathed in late afternoon sunlight, Ethan reflected on the journey. He had started with a single phone call, a moment of urgency, a life hanging in balance. From there, he had learned to see, to understand, and to act. He had discovered that true power isn't measured in wealth, skyscrapers, or status. It's measured in the lives you touch and the good you create. That night, as he returned to his office, he no longer saw it as a fortress of glass and steel. He saw it as a place where people mattered, where kindness and understanding could flourish, and where the smallest acts could ripple into enormous change. For Lily, Ethan had become more than a boss. He had become a guardian, a guide, and a friend. And for Ethan, Lily had become a reminder that in a world full of ambition and demands, the heart still held the power to change everything. And in that quiet understanding, both realized something important. Sometimes, the most meaningful connections come from the moments when someone reaches out, when you answer the call, not for duty, but because someone needs you. That day, Lily's mother smiled at Ethan with genuine gratitude. Lily looked at him with trust, and the billionaire who had once only ruled in power felt richer than ever, not in wealth, but in humanity. The call that had begun it all had not only saved a life, it had changed two forever.